Discipleship. You hear that word all the time, right? But what does it actually look like in real life? Today, we're diving into Jim Petersen's incredible playbook for what he calls spiritual parenting. It's a really practical, relational guide for anyone who's ever thought about helping someone else in their faith journey. So, have you ever been in one of those discipleship programs that just felt a little off? You know, the 6-week course, the workbook with all the fill in the blanks. The intentions are great, but a lot of the time, something just doesn't click. Well, if that sounds familiar, you're definitely not alone. So what if we've been looking at this whole thing backwards? What if the answer isn't a better program or a slicker system, but a totally different way of thinking? This is all about a huge shift, moving away from rigid structures and toward real, organic, person-to-person relationships. All right, so let's dig into the first and maybe most important step in this whole playbook. Before you can do discipleship, it all comes down to who you are and, this is key, where you already are. It's all about becoming what Petersen calls an insider. So what in the world is an insider? Well, it's not some secret agent. It's simply a believer who doesn't pull away from the world but actually lives as a natural, totally integrated part of their community. You know, your workplace, your neighborhood, your book club, these aren't distractions. They're your God-given places of service. And the core idea here is that this isn't about adding one more thing to your already insane schedule. Not at all. It's a total paradigm shift. It's about completely reorienting your mind so you start to see that your everyday world is your ministry. So how do you actually do this? Well, you start seeing your normal life, your job, your family, your hobbies, as the specific place God has put you for a reason. You start looking at your coworkers and neighbors with what he calls kingdom eyes. The point is, you don't have to go find a ministry somewhere else. You just have to be a light right where you're planted. Okay, so once you really embrace that role as an insider, something amazing happens. The nature of your relationships starts to change. And that brings us to the absolute heart of this playbook, this idea of acting as a spiritual parent. Now, this isn't about being some expert with all the answers. It's about being a guide. Think about it. Just like a parent, you're signing up for a long-term nurturing relationship. You're simply walking alongside someone on their journey, guiding them from those first shaky steps of faith, what you could call spiritual infancy, all the way to adulthood. And this parenting role actually has two different sides to it, which Petersen pulls from the Apostle Paul's example. First, there's the mother role. This is all about nurturing, being gentle, cherishing, creating a super safe space for a new believer to really get a handle on grace. But then, as they grow, the role starts to shift more toward a father role, one that encourages, comforts, and really urges them toward taking on responsibility and finding their mission. And this journey, it happens in some really predictable stages. First, there's spiritual infancy, where the main cry is, "Help me." They're totally dependent and need a lot of protection. Then they move into childhood, and the question becomes, "Tell me." They're curious, they're soaking everything up. Then comes adolescence, where the challenge is, "Show me." They're idealistic, and they need to see that your walk matches your talk. And finally, they arrive at adulthood, where they're stable and mature enough to turn to someone else and say, "Follow me." This chart here shows the whole flow. You see how your initiative as the discipler is super high at the beginning, but as the person grows, that initiative starts to shift over to them. The ultimate goal is to work yourself out of a job, to raise them up so they're not a follower anymore, but a mature, Christ-like peer walking alongside you. Okay, so we've got the context, being an insider, and we have the relationship, spiritual parenting. But what is it that actually causes someone to change and grow? This is a huge point because so many approaches get it wrong by starting in the wrong place. This quote right here is the engine of the entire process. Jim Petersen makes this powerful argument that true, lasting change never starts with our actions. It goes way deeper. It begins with our core worldview, the fundamental lens through which we see everything. See, real transformation is always an inside-out job. It has to start at the absolute core, with a person's worldview. Once that worldview begins to change, it naturally starts to reshape their values, what they see as important. And only then, as a result of all that, does their outward behavior start to genuinely and permanently change. This is exactly why just trying to modify behavior, telling someone to stop doing this or start doing that so often fails. It's like trimming the top of a weed but leaving the root completely untouched. You're just treating symptoms. True, deep transformation only happens when you get to the root of it all, that core worldview. Now, this whole process of inside-out change, it's not a solo mission. It absolutely cannot happen in a vacuum. It requires two final, totally non-negotiable elements to make it all work. You can think of them as the soil and the sunshine that make growth possible. First up, community. Spiritual parenting is not a one-on-one isolated project. The New Testament is just so clear on this. We need each other. Nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to maturity all by themselves. We need people to help carry our burdens, to give us wise advice, and to create a place where we can learn both how to serve and how to be served. Growth happens together, period. And that second essential ingredient? It's time. A lot of time. This quote says it all. Oaks of righteousness do not grow up overnight. Deep, strong, lasting growth is a slow, unhurried process. You just can't microwave maturity. In fact, Petersen is really direct about this. He says it can often take, get this, a full decade for a person to truly work through major life issues and start bearing fruit in other people's lives. A decade. That just forces you to throw all your short-term agendas right out the window. So what's the big lesson here? It's that spiritual maturity is a marathon, not a sprint. If we're really gonna do this spiritual parenting thing, we have to completely ditch our own timetables and just commit to being in it for the long, slow, and incredibly rewarding journey with somebody. So in the end, the road to maturity really runs along these three parallel tracks. We need community for that vital support. We need competence as we learn new skills and truths. And most importantly, we need character, that deep inside-out transformation of who we really are. And there it is, the entire playbook boiled down to one single sentence. Be an insider parent, focus on fostering that inside-out change, and do it all within the context of community over a long period of time. It's so simple, but it's incredibly profound. So this playbook, it's not just a theory, it's a call to action. It's a challenge to completely reevaluate how we see our world. Your office, your neighborhood, your family, these aren't just random places you go. They're your field. So the question this leaves us with is this: who are you an insider to?